Now we are moving to the next part of our gathering here. And I'm happy to greet our three guest speakers for this afternoon. The first to be talking today is Professor Sari Nusseibeh, a former president of Al-Quds University in Jerusalem, a retired professor of philosophy, and a much sought-after guest lecturer across the world. Professor Nusseibeh co-chaired with Menahem Yaari a pioneering project, IPSO, a joint Israeli-Palestinian initiative which brought together Israeli and Palestinian scientists to work on joint scientific projects. Coming to us from Jerusalem, he probably took the longest way to arrive here. And he is a particularly welcome guest in this house. Please, Professor Nusseibeh.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, happy birthday. Well, this is a very special moment, very special event, and I'd like to express my gratitude to have been included in it, even though all I can contribute are a few reminiscences of brief moments spread well over 40 years, less than the number of years we knew each other, which nevertheless have left an indelible imprint on my outlook on my enemy. It has already been a few years since my wife Lucy and I last met with Ronit and Menahem over a friendly dinner at their home on the eastern slopes of Mevatzeret Zion, on the eve, so to speak, of the dark viral era that began to spread around us. That was Corona. And the eve, so to speak, and that has since then somehow lingered lethally in a different form. There was gloominess in the atmosphere over dinner, one that accompanied my wife and myself as we drove home afterwards. This is not what we signed in for, was the electric sentence he said over dinner, and that seemed to capture the mood that evening, a sentence my wife still vividly recollects. As I said on a previous occasion, I first met Professor Yaari when he paid me a surprise home visit in the Old City in the aftermath of Israel's invasion of southern Lebanon in 1982. The PLO in Lebanon was the target of that war, but so were the budding university campuses in the occupied Palestinian territories, where Israel, in a move reminiscent of what we today witness on American campuses, issued military orders by which it believed it could contain the sprouting nationalism of Palestinian youth in those territories. Did these orders conflict with basic academic values? Professor Yaari led a team of concerned Israeli academics to look into these orders, into our responses to them, and to write a report about that. During those turbulent times, when universities were often shut down or professors barred from entry or from teaching, concerned Israeli academics had started volunteering to give classes at Birzeit, where I happened to have just started work a couple of years earlier. Now, I'm sure that different bridges of mutual interest across the Green Line were anyway in full swing by that time, or since 1967, especially in the trade and labor sectors. But here was a specific and critical point of friction between the two sides, where it was common values among academics from both sides that were of primary concern and that drew them together. I call it a critical point because this academic interaction slowly encouraged among students and academic staff an internal discourse that eventually led to the articulation of a practical political aspiration for the nationalist cause. Those days, you'll also recall, witnessed the first near 500,000 Peace Now demonstration, calling on the Israeli army to return to its base from southern Lebanon in the aftermath of Sabra and Shatila, and on the Israeli government to make peace with its neighbors as the answer to security. All-out wars must be a last resort, as the so-called officer's letter to Shamir said. For a few, or from a bird's eye view, it began to look like tentative steps of common values and practical interests were beginning to reach out to one another, bringing the two sides closer. As fate would paradoxically have it, the expulsion of the PLO from Lebanon, which sparked the above-mentioned nationalist turmoil in the occupied territories, turned out to have been just another step in bringing the PLO leadership into that budding discourse and then into the territories themselves. Later, when the Washington talks began, tens of academics and professionals from both sides engaged each other in discussions and joint research to determine in specific and detailed ways how to merge values with mutual interest. Various initiatives were beginning to open up the two societies to one another. But the so-called second or third negotiation tracks were special because they were the technical laboratories, so to speak, used to identify how and where values and interests converged. I want to mention that Janet Aviad, one of the founders of Peace Now, made full use of the Bronfman Foundation to support these early joint activities, as did the Belgian government on behalf of the Palestinians. Both of them had institutions just around here, both the Belgian consulate across the road and the Bronfman Foundation on the other side of the roundabout. It was not long before the Israel-Palestine Science Organization, or IPSO, was founded, with Professor Yaari and myself becoming deputy chairs of an international board headed by Nobel laureate Thorsten Wiesel and other science luminaries, whose sole purpose was to further encourage joint research in the mutual interest and common values of both sides. Besides Professor Wiesel, Yaari was the dynamo who brought all these luminaries together and who acted as the moving spirit that kept the machine churning over more than 15 years. I don't know how you did it, but you did it. Amazing. Sadly, I must confess, while Jewish and international organizations became enthusiastic financial and moral supporters of the effort, Arab parties and organizations preferred to look the other way. As you all know, those were not confidence-building years. Grassroots opportunities were not fully grasped, or they were not properly seized. We have, I think, our respective political leaderships to blame for that. Gradually, new openings were outrun by pre-existing trends, these being reinforced by a latent counter-movement on both sides. Inevitably, what had started as a hopeful surge in academic cooperation was beginning to find itself struggling against the tide. Indeed, among other things, the BDS movement was gaining ground, reaching into the academic world. But we still held on, believing in Yaari fashion that we must account for the long term, this hopefully extending into a durable future. This accounting for the long term is the only bit of economics I understood from looking at what Yaari's research was about. I don't think I understood it. You should have explained it to me. Here I must briefly confess to my own take on the subject, probably controversial on all sides. While I thought that the argument of BDS should be made in international academic circles, and international academics should make their own reasoned decisions about them and be respected for whatever these were, the case between Israeli and Palestinian academics should be kept out of the circuit. And indeed, cooperation between the two sides should be continued and intensified, since it is only bridges that can be built between the two sides, however difficult the endeavor, that can eventually bring them together. So, encouraged by Professor Yaari, I co-signed as president of Al-Quds University at the time, with the president of the Hebrew University, a pledge of continued cooperation. I later defended my position before a large university audience at Al-Quds, but while my arguments were respectfully received, they did not stand up to an increasingly prevalent mood of general wariness of all peace efforts. Professor Yaari and I shared many moments during those years across Europe and the United States, either attending science conferences, appealing to foundations, or holding meetings with members of the board where they pored over joint project applications by Israelis and Palestinians. My contribution as a non-scientist was minimal, but in the back of my head, two issues that always figured in these discussions were political value and equity. The latter, equity, meaning that proposed budgets by the scientists be evenly divided between the two sides. You must therefore imagine my delight when, in one of those early meetings, Professor Yaari insisted from the word go that budgets should be divided 2/3 for the Palestinian side and 1/3 to the Israeli side. He explained that, in terms of laboratories and equipment, Palestinian scientists are disadvantaged and therefore needed more support to build up their capacity. The board naturally concurred. It was really an amazing statement he made in that board meeting, and it sticks in my mind until today. A sort of very piercing insight into what the situation is and what the situation demands. Let me, with a final few words, sum up the cumulative effect on me of all these and similar moments. In fact, perhaps one word will do as much as another, and that is comfort. What is comfort in the context of a relationship with the enemy? It is that, notwithstanding all the painful and traumatic circumstances that envelop who you or the other are, or figuratively represent, you could still find a path through the blinding maze where you could find human solace in looking the other in the eye. You might also detect outlying traces of fear or weakness there. But the solace and comfort you feel assures you that you are allies, not enemies. That's how I felt with Menahem throughout the relationship we had. Naturally, this sense of comfort cannot turn the tables round, but it is a human chord that may keep the flicker of humanity alive. Happy birthday, thank you very much. And I'd like to also thank Avishai, also a very, very, very old acquaintance who've all become very old, who actually alerted me to this event. Thank you, thank you.